turn my good music off. Leave. Okay. We're setting up our meeting for Facebook here, bruh. Oh, good.
Mm-hmm.
So it's logging in right now.
Do you use an external app to do that, or does Zoom have something that allows you to do that?
It has something that allows you to do that. You have to pay for it though.
Yeah.
So
that's why I'm Tom Ayers, by the way.
Really?
It's a shared account. I gave him the money to do it for some other Brulosophy thing, and he put his name on it. So whatever.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Why are you? Okay, close out of this. There we go. All right. Sully's here. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's Facebook's weird. I don't know why. Here's Sully, right in time. See what I was saying? There's right on time. I mean, not really, but
fashionably on time.
That's right. You're muted though, Sully.
Am I?
There we go.
Not anymore.
What's up, brother?
How are you, man?
I'm all right. How are you?
I just raced home from the brewery.
Oh, I love it.
And I'm here with you and Marshall. Marshall, how are you?
Not bad, man. How have you been?
I've been good.
We are live on Facebook, Sully, so please, no swearing.
Okay, I was just saying that maybe everybody should be drinking 21st Amendment beer. That's all I was just saying. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, this unsolicited plug is coming to you live right now.
I think everyone should be drinking that too, especially because celebration season's over.
And did we the 25th? Beer's like dead on the vine now, isn't it? I love that beer, by the way. I'm kidding, Ken. I love you.
Ken's desperately watching.
Yes. Did you hear what he said, honey?
He has a pack of Funyuns, and he's just like, I can't wait for the show to start.
Funyuns.
Yeah, you got to drop the Funyun snack every once in a while.
I like that. That was good. It's a good.
Thanks, man.
A good drop.
Yeah, so man, we're just here talking homebrew. You know what I mean?
All right, let's get into it.
All right, here we go. Welcome, everybody. It's the session, the final session of 2020, which is, I don't know about you guys, but it's personally been the best year of my entire life. This has been a great year. I can't wait until I see what 2021 has in store for us, because nothing can really top this. This year was phenomenal for everyone.
You haven't stopped talking about it.
That's all I really talk about.
It's every day, best year of my life. I go, please, there's a pandemic going on. Can you settle down?
Yeah. And I go, well, look, man, everyone, you pick nits all you want. Okay. But I don't know. It's been a banger year for most everybody, especially small business. I feel like
small business and the introverted, very much
exactly.
So.
Yeah.
If you're holed up in your home, you enjoy doing that all the time. This was an amazing year for you.
Yeah, I've run through about 6 sets of sheets, which these usually last me about 10 years. So,
why?
Marshall, we're live now. I don't know if you know this. You probably.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was talking to personal, private matter.
Okay.
Matter.
Yeah. Welcome everybody. We are here, of course, with Marshall from Brulosophy, and we're going to be talking some homebrew. I feel like the best way to sort of close out 2020 is chatting a little bit about homebrew. We've done a lot of commercial beer focused shows lately, and every once in a while we like to sort of direct and sort of bring everybody around towards homebrewing topics every now and then within those commercial sessions. But this is going to be 100% homebrewing related. Now, I haven't homebrewed in a long time, although I have a setup. I just haven't used it yet because I need to figure out how to. It's the Brewzilla. Got it from the More Beer fellows.
Oh, okay.
And I have no idea how to use it. I texted Chris Graham. I was like, hey, so how do I do it? He goes, hey, you just put in some water. You'll figure it out. I'm like, oh.
Well, it's grain, it's water, it's hops and yeast, right?
Yeah.
That's it, right?
Sure, but I don't know the water to grain ratio, and then you have to charge, and I don't know how much water. So I haven't done it yet. But I'm going to email Chris tomorrow. I'm going to swear to him that in the first quarter of 2021, I will learn how to brew, and I will homebrew on this stupid thing, and I will become a home brewer again. So I'm very excited for the show, Marshall.
I'm excited. I'm sorry, Marshall. I just want to say real quickly before you jump in, I'm excited too. I mean, I started this whole thing.
Before you jump in to answer the question.
Oh, was it a question? I was just like, piling on with how great homebrewing is, and that's it. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can we start over? I'm sorry, Marshall. This is your time to shine. I'll be quiet.
This is not.
I'm just
I'd
the
rather
pro
hear your
brewer in the
voice than mine.
corner.
I don't even think it was a question. I'm just pulling chains. Go ahead, Sully.
It's fine. I was just going to say, this will take about 5 minutes, so sit back. I was just going to say that, I started as a home brewer too, like a lot of pro brewers, and I miss it. It's been a little while since I've done it, but I've actually been thinking about doing it this past year. Then I haven't been thinking about it doing it in a while, but the most important thing is I have been thinking about it, and I have all my equipment. I mean, we developed a lot of, brews, my home brew that turned into beers that were released. So, I mean, I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I saw the list of stuff, and I'm just going to sit back and take notes.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So Marshall, talk away.
There we go. Yeah. Applicable to the commercial scale. I'm sure that's what everyone wants to hear out there.
That's all homebrewing recipes are classic. They're well known for being scalable easily.
Right. Exactly. Everything you do on this scale. Yep. Right. It's interesting though, Jason, because the reality is where we are today. If the last time you brewed a batch was 6 or 7 years ago, things really are different in the way that people view making beer at home. The Brewzilla is a perfect example. Rather than lighting a fire under a kettle, you get to press a couple of buttons and wonder what else you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, you plug in your kettle, and especially since the Pico Brew sort of, they went
right.
Paper, which I was disappointed with personally. I really liked using.
You said a lot.
I loved it. I thought it was really, really great, and I thought it was sort of the shot in the arm that the industry needed, especially that higher ended, even way back, we were talking with the More Beer, when I was working at More Beer, we were sort of looking at the Australian homebrew market as like sort of inspiration for how to bring that ease of use and that sort of accessibility to people. Granted, Pico Brew was on the higher end of that scale, but it still sort of, mattered to people who don't necessarily have time to do this or space to do this. Here's the thing that you can do. So I really do like these automated systems. There is a learning curve there, but I thought, 10 years ago, it's like, there's no room for anybody to make a weird homebrew gadget anymore. Come to find out, there's plenty of room. You just got to think about it.
That's what most people are using nowadays. In fact, if you look at the curve of the rise in electric homebrewing setups, I think the Pico Brew was at the very start of it. And I think it'd be hard to separate that rise from the fact that the Zymatic was out there and people were interested in something that was more plug and play oriented. We do an annual survey just to kind of gauge, thumb on the pulse of the homebrewing scene. And it's shocking. I'll look up the numbers here in a sec, but the proportion of homebrewers who take that survey, which we cut it off around 26 or 2,700 respondents, who are electric brewing, has risen phenomenally just in the last 4 years.
Wow.
Does it track against age? Because like as an old guy, I would totally be all over that. I'd be like, all right, I get to push a button and then take a nap. I'm all over that. I mean, does it?
You can't break it down that deep, Sully.
Well, let's get on it then. Okay?
Yeah. I guess it's good. It's just an extra feel. What you need is someone who's used to looking through data.
Oh, yeah. Go find one of those people. I've got it up here now. I'll tell you. Well, we break it down by age, and so this one, just 2,769 people, 42% of all of the people who took this survey were 30 to 39 years old. Only 12% were under 30 years old. That's wild to me.
Why?
Because I started when I was 21, 22, right? And that was everybody I know who's my age now started way back in their 20s. It doesn't seem to be the case anymore. Or people aren't getting started and we just stuck around because we still like it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's it. And I mean, I remember, again, being at the sort of edge of the homebrew scene in the, late 90s, early 2000s, and there were not a lot of young people. And especially being a part of those, whenever we got someone that was sub 40, everyone's like, oh my God, this is great. This is cool.
Young blood.
Blood, yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to have aspirin out for everybody to use, really. And then going to HomebrewCon, you started seeing younger people, and the younger people were bringing in their spouses. So you were starting to get a different demographic gender-wise also, which was very nice too. And sort of the whole thing sort of split open somewhere, I would guess around 2005, 2008, maybe, where you started really noticing that there was a shift in the demographic of the homebrewers skewing younger and, spreading out.
And now it seems like those younger people have stuck around. They've just aged a bit into a different demographic. Because, it's just, I mean, obviously, you're not going to see too many people admitting that they're under 21 in America homebrewing, I guess.
Right.
But still, that age range is just interesting to me. But yeah, the electric homebrewing thing, it's blown up, dude. I think you're going to love it. We've got one of our guys. One of the Brulosophy guys is brewing on a couple Brewzillas that we also got from More Beer, and he loves it. It takes a little bit of time because it's 120, but still, you dedicated circuit and you're good to go, man.
Man, time that I don't have to be doing anything is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Great. No, I'm sorry, honey. I can't watch the kid. I'm brewing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you're just waiting. Yeah. You never know when this thing can go sideways.
I got to stay on top of this.
I really
So I tell new people in the hobby is that brewing is about 75% waiting, 10% cleaning, and then the rest is actually doing shit, that is brewing related.
It's like flying over the country.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I appreciate you joining us, Marshall. And what I wanted to do really is sort of get the rundown of what has been popular in home brewing. And, for people who don't know, over at Brulosophy, you guys sort of, we've talked about it before. You've been on the show before. We don't like to say busting myths of home brewing.
No.
But I feel like
you say myth busters of home brewing.
You can say that. That is definitely no, but I feel like you sort of like correct the thinking about what matters.
I mean, yeah. I would say that we just test interesting things out to see what impact they have. When I believe it was National Geographic or Popular Mechanics did an article on what we do a few years ago, and the title of it was Mythbusters of Homebrewing. It started. We got a lot of crap for that because I did not come up with that. But
no, because every time you're interviewed, everybody thinks that all of the information is just directly comes from you. That the reporter has no sort of say.
Yeah. Exactly. That's not what we're doing, though. Really, I think this is the case probably for most hobbies and activities that people engage in because they enjoy. Is you get to a point where you're kind of stuck and maybe even a little bit bored, so you start looking for other things, other ways to keep it interesting. Mm-hmm. And I was in a spot where I've got a PhD in psychology, so I'm kind of interested in human perception. And so I was to a point where I thought, well, I'm going to start kind of putting some of this stuff that I learned in grad school into this hobby of mine and see where it goes. And that's where we've ended up. The initial intent was actually for me to learn why it is we do certain things. And it just so happens that the results from these very, very, when you isolate a variable so much, sometimes it might be that it's a compounded effect, but the results have been different than what I expected for the most part.
That's right. You're challenging the social norms of homebrewing. I mean, that's really all. That's sort of, I think, what home brewing or any hobby sort of needs really to progress is you need somebody to look at it analytically and go, well, why are we doing this? Imagine if we all just stayed with I'm such an asshole homebrewer right now, but Charlie Papazian's book. Well, what's it called?
With that? No, I'm just kidding.
The Complete Joy.
Thank you. The Complete Joy of Homebrewing. Yeah. Imagine we all used to be boiling chickens in our wort. Like,
oh yeah,
you know what I mean? There's no sort of, or we do like secondary fermentations or whatever. But you just sort of need that on a mass scale too, because then you can have it anecdotally on some forum where some guy like Big Wort Masher 69420 says, I don't do secondary ferment, and then no one knows about it.
Well, no, I love this because honestly, it's like, you want to talk about scalability. I mean, you do things in a professional brewery that you just do because we've always done it that way. Yeah. And you don't know why sometimes why you're doing it. It's just sort of this institutional knowledge that kind of exists in sort of, any brewery you go to. You see it a lot of old breweries, especially, when we've partner brewed at other breweries, you go, why are we doing it that way? It's like, well, we've always done it that way. Well, why? Well, I don't know, because the last guy did it that way.
Yeah.
So this is good stuff.
Well, and I think for what made it so successful for us was that it requires an element of risk, risk taking. There's a potential that you're going to screw up a batch, which you just can't do that on a commercial scale. Yeah. If even just taking the risk, maybe it won't make a difference, but that risk alone and the potential for having to dump, 15 barrels of beer down the drain I don't care if I have to dump 5 gallons of beer down the drain. If I learn something from it, it's worth it. I mean, I grew up, my favorite channel to watch was Discovery Channel as a kid. I wasn't much into cartoons and Star Wars, you know? And so this is just kind of me putting that mentality, I guess, to use in a realm that I find really interesting. Yeah. And, you know, and what's interesting to me is that if you go and you look at, we're going to talk about some of the more popular experiments that we've performed just based on views at brulosophy.com. If you look at the ones that are the most popular, they were all written almost 5 years ago. I mean, these articles were published almost 5 years ago, but there's something about these specific variables that I think people just find either valuable or interesting or want to know if it actually matters type of thing. So you mentioned throwing chickens in the wort. I think one of the reasons they used to do that was because of the collagen in chicken bones would help to clarify the beer in the end. And nowadays we use that collagen. It's just in an isolated form called gelatin.
Right, we put it in our lips and our teeth.
That's right. Eyebrows, you know. Whatever. Yeah.
Well, that's a good segue. Let's get into the first one. It's the gelatin effect.
Yeah, this was I'd never heard of clarifying beer with gelatin up until about 5 or 6 years ago. A friend of mine who was relatively new in homebrewing, which means he was on way different forums than I was accustomed to at the time. He said that he'd been doing it and his beers were just coming out brilliantly clear. Now, as an aside, this was way before the hazy IPA thing when he started doing this, probably 5 or 6, 7 years ago, something like that.
The good old days, right? The
good old days, yeah. And so he was brewing these beers that were far more clear than most of me and my homebrew buds were making. And so I figured I'd test it out. As I was researching it, obviously, I think the biggest claims were that, well, if it's pulling out the haze causing stuff, it's also going to pull out stuff that tastes and smells good, sure. Which sounded reasonable to me. I mean, but as I dug deeper and deeper, what I came to discover in my research was that gelatin, when it's mixed with water, becomes slightly positively charged. And so when it hits wort, that positive charge is going to naturally attract negatively charged things, which in the case of beer is yeast and more notably protein, which are two of the biggest haze causers in beer. Mm-hmm. Polyphenols and stuff, the flavor compounds, there's not much research on it pulling that stuff out. One could argue that if it pulled everything out, you'd have a beer that wasn't beer. It was just water with a slug of beer on the bottom. And so I ended up putting it to the test in a dry hopped pale ale. I wanted something really hoppy just to see what would happen. And lo and behold, tasters were unable to tell the beers apart. You know, you had, I served, let's see. How many people did this was in the early days, so it may not have been too many, but 12 people. Out of those 12, we would have expected 8 people to get it right if it was significant. Only 5 people did, so just over a third of the people, which you'd expect in random guessing. These beers, and just on an anecdotal level, they tasted identical to me. I mean, I couldn't tell them apart if they were in opaque glasses.
And because I've heard this about the filtering, and I've found it to be true, you know, in my own home brewing, but with like the plate filters, with the actual filter pad, that's definitely, and you can tell it's pulling out because the filter pad changes color. I mean, there's something in there, and it does taste a little, you know, different. It tastes a little lighter maybe, but with gelatin, I don't think I've ever used gelatin. I was always too cool for that.
Too cool for gelatin's the poor man's clarifier, dude. Come on now. You know, that's what we use in the hood. We've done an experiment on mechanical filtration as well, and if I recall correctly, people couldn't tell those beers apart either. The thing is, we talk a lot about bias and sensory analysis, and if I see 2 beers and they look different, chances are I'm going to perceive them on my palate differently as well. It's a part of the reason these days you have to have a hazy beer on tap if you want to stay in business as a commercial brewer. People expect to see it. It could taste exactly like, you know, your classic West Coast clear IPA, but if it's not hazy, people are going to taste it differently.
Yeah, I do think the hazy thing has sort of transcended reality and now just become an object of people's desires rather than a focal point for flavor. And it does change the flavor.
It's a look.
It's a look. I'm not going to say that
Instagrammable.
It's right.
But
it's become the thing to chase instead of, you know, people figuring out what it's there for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting phenomenon. I mean, now it's become a thing of beauty, whereas 7 or 8 years ago, I wouldn't have touched a friend's beer if it looked like that, because I love my wife and wouldn't want to hurt her in bed that night. That's what I would have been thinking the entire time is there's no way I'm going to let that into my gut. And nowadays it's just the norm. And on some level, I got to give credit to the people who made it big, because people love it. I mean, consumers love it. And if that's your gauge, then good Lord, they're doing a good job, So the ones that have flakes in it, I don't get that. That's what I don't get.
Yeah, it's a little too weird. I wonder where especially with the pandemic, I wonder where the commercial beer industry would be if we didn't have this hazy beer thing. Because there are breweries, Sully, we've talked about this before. There are breweries who are sort of keeping it together because of hazy beers.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, those are the newer breweries that have just sort of popped on the scene in the last 5 years or so. But I mean, look, beer sales are way up. I mean, well, actually, I was just going to use Sierra Nevada as the example. I mean, but their big seller right now is Hazy Little Thing. So it's definitely on a mass scale. It's super popular as well. But Marshall, you made a point about like what your preconceived notion is before you try something. I had that happen to me today. I was told to taste something that I knew there was something wrong with it, and I'm just like totally finding it. I'm like, all right, yeah, it's there, and this is something I had tasted before, so I already knew what I was going to taste. But yeah, the idea that you walk into a situation like that, you really need to be blind on it. So
yeah, it's we pulled a little prank on one of my neighbors a while back where a buddy of mine is constantly saying he tastes metallic and stuff, and so we
beer.
Yeah, well, that's the old saying, right? Yeah, you're doing it right, Sully. What we did is we all of us, our go-to refreshing beer is Miller Lite around these parts, and so what we had done is prepped a pint of Miller Lite for my buddy who constantly tastes metallic, but we told him it was a beer that he had previously said had a metallic. So sure enough, he's drinking it out of the pint glass and all he tastes is metallic, until he found out that it's your favorite water beer in there. And but it's so predictable and it's so easy to set up. Everybody falls for it. It doesn't mean you're stupid. That's just human nature. I mean, we all do it. If you tell somebody to expect a difference, they will find it and they'll invent what that difference is, and then they will stick to their guns. It's a fascinating phenomenon.
See, never be friends with a psychologist.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man. I'm always analyzing you.
Don't ever do it. Hey,
That's
why
funny.
come your living room has all couches? I don't understand. Well, why don't you lay down and talk about it?
Let's have a conversation about that. So why are you talking about the couches so much?
Yeah. Barbecues at Marshall's house are never that fun.
People are in the corner crying.
Yeah.
My dad, damn it. Give me another rib.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the gelatin thing's an interesting one. We've done quite a few experiments on that variable in various states. In fact, I was talking with John Palmer a while back, and he wondered about the impact because you don't use that much gelatin in a 5-gallon batch, or even I've had friends find 15-barrel batches, and you're just not using that much. So he wondered if it would, the clarifying would happen faster if you used way more. And as it stands, it actually did not clear the beer anywhere near as well, which I thought was interesting. We've done gelatin experiments as well on New England IPA. In fact, it was we did that as a collaboration with a buddy of mine on the East Coast, and it didn't clear the New England IPA. It made it slightly less opaque than the non-gelatin find one, but it makes you wonder what's in there, what's hanging around if it's not yeast and protein. It's so weird. It's so weird.
We did the same thing. We actually did a 12-barrel batch of a hoppy Pilsner, and we used this product called Biofine, which is basically a colloidal solution of silicate acid. And it didn't clear up. So I said, well, let's add more. And nothing ever happened. It never cleared. It was always had this light haze to it. I think we pulled everything out that we could.
There's a saturation point where it just doesn't.
Yeah. And the part of it that gets me is that there's if you take the whole picture of what it takes to make a New England IPA versus a West Coast IPA, it's really not that disparate. I mean, you're not doing that many things different, and yet what those small things do is produce this, I heard the term haze stability recently, but it makes sense,
Well, it totally does.
Yeah, sure, but also fuck that person.
Well, you're right about that. I mean, it is important. I mean, it's funny to say, but I mean, otherwise, if you don't have that, you're going to end up with a big chunk of yeast or some other protein at the bottom of your can or bottle.
Well,
which some people don't care about these days. I mean, that's
that's
wild.
the beauty of the can. You can kind of like, mixes up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's what Warren and I used to always rail on at the early days of this thing, where we couldn't shut up about hazy IPAs because it's the chunky parts, and that's what all hazy beers were at that point that we had come across. But I think somewhere along the line, information sort of filtered out, no pun intended, to make these beers without chunks in them, but have that hazy thing. And so now I think you see less chunks, or at least I read about it less on Instagram, because I don't.
I think you see more intentional chunks is what I'm noticing, is beers being made. Yes, dude. The what are they calling them? The
Fruit Loops?
Stuff like, There's like I mean, I have seen people love, comment on these beers that they're pouring that have little chunks of fruit in them. They have, but that's what people are after. It just, I don't get it. And I'm willing to accept others do. I have to ask you though, Jason, is there a hazy beer that you've had so far that you would say, you know what, I'll go back and have another pint of that?
No.
Okay. I'm in the same boat. I'm in the same boat.
But there have been beers that I can't remember, and they've all been on the show. Like the majority of the exposure that I've had to hazy IPAs has been from doing this show.
Right.
Because it's forced upon me. But it's my job at that point, which is kind of cool. But I've never taken one from the wild, so to speak. But I've had beers that I've gone, okay, I can see why people like this style. Right. I can sort of get it. And those are few and far between. A lot of those hazy beers they're aspirin-y, and they're kind of gritty, and I don't get it. Like I don't understand it, because there's no flavor except this weird.
Well, there's hop flavor.
But like not, and it's
it is sweet.
Thing. But the ones that I do get they have a softer malt, like the malt kind of comes through also, and it's not just a thing. And but yeah, those are few to that make me realize, oh, okay, I understand. This could be a good commodity for people to purchase.
Yeah, my experience with hazy IPA that I've actually somewhat enjoyed have come from being up in Yakima for hop harvest and having fresh hop versions of it. And I think a part of it is that earthy, grassy, in a good way thing that you get from fresh hop beers happens to pair well with that odd aspirin-y, chalky thing that I get in most hazy IPAs. Not that I would chug it like I would, a chucking up Pilsner or something, but it's good. I mean, it's good enough, and not as bad as I would expect.
What about West Coast style hazy IPAs? Have you had those? It's sort of variant, like where it's actually more bitter and but still has like that turbidity and also the hop flavor and aroma. Have you had those yet?
I've come across one or two of those. Whether or not they know that they were doing that or not.
Yeah, that's what my comment was going to be. Exactly what you said. I don't know if it was intentional on their part, but I've had bitter New England IPAs.
I made one that was not intentional, and I was like, God damn, this is good. So I'm going to make it again.
There you go. Happy accidents.
There you go.
There's someone in the chat asking a question about the gelatin experiment. He's saying, was the timing between the two the same set of time from brew day? Did you test after the unclarified beer settled?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the timing on all of our experiments, regardless of what the variable is, obviously there are going to be some variables where you have to brew differently. Biotransformation dry hop is one where we settled on brewing 2 days apart so that we could test that out in the cleanest way possible. For this one, the beers were brewed they were brewed next to each other, fermented next to each other, packaged at the same time. After a day of cold crashing in primary, one got gelatin, the other didn't. Then they were both packaged 2 or 3 days later, and they set in the keg for probably a week or two before we started collecting data. I did only collect one set of data and didn't hold out for too long. The argument that we should be waiting like 3 or 4 months before collecting data, I don't know anybody who likes beer that old, but we see that quite often. Well, if you'd waited just a couple more weeks, but I don't want to wait that long. Right? The whole point in homebrewing is to have beer as quickly as possible that taste all right.
Yeah, I feel like if you waited that long, you would be skewing the results, because who waits that long?
The age effect.
Nobody. I'm drinking more pints uncarbonated, or at least undercarbonated, of my own beer than I have fully carbonated beers, because I'm impatient.
Well, and Sully could talk about this more than I can, but most of the commercial brewers that I know of aren't sitting on beer for 3 weeks before they keg it up and put it in the brewery. It's
in and out. Typically, it's in and out. You put it in a bright tank, and you want to get rid of it as soon as possible.
Right. And so the idea is using practical methodology and understanding, of what other brewers are doing. That's the approach we typically try to take. So this one, I mean, you look at the fact that the gelatin beer was as clear as it was. I mean, it was almost bright. It looked like it was filtered.
Yeah, I was looking at the pictures that you put up there, and you put up ones like from the day after in the keg, and then a little bit longer, and that unfiltered just sort of gets cloudier.
And what's interesting about this as well, just again, kind of as a kind of post hoc analysis here, is that those were fermented with the Fuller strain, which is a highly flocculent strain. It's known to drop as hard as a rock, and yet that beer was still hazy, which to me suggests, since it was pretty heavily dry hopped, that was likely a function of the dry hop. And so again, this argument that if you're gonna find a beer that's been dry hopped, you're gonna lose a lot of the value that you put into that beer, right? Because it's gonna pull out the hop goodness. It just didn't seem to do that. And anecdotally, I've probably gelatin fined 200 batches of beer since then. I've never had an issue. We've got one of the guys over here who refers to it as powdered thyme. I kind of like that. Yeah.
THYME, I imagine.
Yeah, right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your another experiment you did, high versus low mash temperatures.
Oh yeah, I mean,
we
all know.
Really interesting, man. Because like, yeah, we've even said it on the show or in the early days, or I still hear it every now and then. Well, I mashed at 147. Well, try 152 and see if that really helps. Actually, some of the guys on Dr. Homebrew even do that, and I stopped myself from stepping in, going 3-4 degrees is not going to matter. I promise you, it's not good.
Well,
we've seen a difference, like a 1 degree difference.
I mean, you have.
Mm-hmm.
Pray tell.
Oh, Marshall has something to tell you.
I know. Well, it's cool. You're punking me right now, Marshall. I know what's going on right now.
Yeah, we're setting you up. Sully, you've seen a 1 degree difference.
Yes.
Come in and have a seat here.
Lay on the couch. Let's talk about this. You just over oxygenated, sir.
What are your feelings about that, Sully? That's the thing about mash temperature is there's an inarguable effect that it has on beer. There's absolutely measurable, predictable impact that beta amylase and alpha amylase are going to have in the mash. We know that. It's well established. We've shown it over and over and over again. The argument that inspired me to test it out was that if you're mashing too warm, there's going to be residual long chain dextrins that are perceptibly sweet. And that a higher FG, and I guess that's kind of a side argument, that a higher FG is going to result in a sweeter beer. I believed it. I bought it hook, line, and sinker, and then I went and tested it out, like the nut that I am. Oddly enough, despite there being a big difference in the finishing gravities of these beers, one finished at 10.05 and the other finished at 10.14. So a 9 specific gravity point difference. That to me is you're going to taste a difference. That just wasn't the case. Out of 20 people, 11 people should have gotten it right, been able to do that. That's not that many. It's barely over half. But if 11 people had gotten it right, we could have said with some confidence that these beers were distinguishable. Only 9 people did. That's not much more than a third. And we've done this one over and over again as well. And people just cannot taste a difference, at least within the ranges that we've tested. This one in particular was 147 degrees Fahrenheit versus 161. Because to me, those kind of are the extreme ends.
Yeah.
The Fahrenheit version, the book ends of your suggested mash temperatures. Yeah, just wild to me. I couldn't tell them apart. They tasted identical to me. The biggest difference was their alcohol level, but I couldn't even taste the alcohol difference between them.
So what does that mean? It just mash temperature doesn't matter anymore?
Well, I think,
Marshall.
What about
what I've taken it to mean is that mash temperature is a ideal lever for adjusting ABV. So if you want to make a session IPA, stop trying to throw all these weird grains at it and making this muddled mess. Just mash at 165 and see what you can get away with the grist that you might use for a standard pale ale. I've done that, by the way.
What do you think, Sully?
Well, I mean, I was just taking issue with it because that came up today, as a matter of fact. But we're actually dialing ABV in because we have to hit a mark, or otherwise we'll be off and could get in trouble in Texas. So we are playing with minor adjustments in mash temperature, but there's other variables that might be affecting this ABV issue, and so we're just isolating each step as we go, so we know what we can measure in the end. So, or what we are measuring in the end.
I mean, that
was
is
that one change,
because, like, part of the in the home brewing advice, it's always what hops you're using, make sure you're using fresh ingredients, blah blah, and then it's mash temperature.
Yeah,
that's it. But you're telling me that it might not. So Sully, you sort of muttered under your breath at one point. What about bitterness?
Yeah, I did mutter. I do a lot of muttering, but yeah. I mean, I guess that's the other issue, is that once you have a higher final gravity, that your perceived bitterness will drop off versus a drier beer. Essentially, if you have a drier beer, your bitterness, all things being equal, will be highly perceived versus a higher FG.
See, and that was one of the things that I started questioning after the multiple mash temp experiments that we've done, is what is it that we attribute final gravity as being the sole contributor to perceived dryness, and I'm not sure that's what it is. I wonder if it's not, for example, bitterness that contributes to that perception of dryness. If you give me a international amber lager that just doesn't have or a Cal Common or something like that, that's known to be somewhat malty, but that doesn't have the right level of bitterness, I might perceive it as being far more sweet than it actually is. And that's just because of the way sweetness and bitterness, work for human perception. So I don't know if it's, I just don't know if it's FG that contributes to that perception of dryness. Obviously there's objective dryness, right?
Mm-hmm.
If something finishes at 10:02, obviously you can call that dry. But you can I've had Saison fermented with specific strains that get all the way down to, 1.000 specific gravity that have body, that don't have that perception of crisp dryness.
And so you're saying bitterness plays into that?
I think so. I think
right.
when it's balanced properly, you can toy around with the perception of dryness, not arguing that it's a function of FG, based on the level of bitterness that you throw at a beer, I think.
Well, what's fascinating is the photos of the fermentation. So your low mash temp had like a big blow off, it looks like, but your high mash temp didn't. What is that? So, just more proteins, short chain? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know the lingo anymore, dude.
Well, I think it's just because there was more fermentable sugar. I mean, those long chain dextrins in the high mash temp aren't fermentable, which is why you resulted with a lower ABV and a higher FG. So you've just got more free, sugar in there for that yeast to ferment. So it just went a little more wild than the other one did. That's just a hunch.
Yeah, for sure.
That's probably pretty correct.
And you've done these several times.
Yeah, we've done the mash temp one on various styles. That's another one of the common responses we'll get is, well, maybe it's just for that style or whatever. So we've done them with high ABV styles, and for the most part, I can't recall one, and somebody will call me out on this, I'm sure, but I can't recall one that came back significant when looking specifically at just the impact of mash temperature. I have to imagine that if you were to go to the ultra extremes and, maybe do something like 135, versus 180 or something, then I'm sure you'd see a difference. But then you can start to get outside of those conversion zones.
The low mash temperature one being so active could be because it's next to that little red wagon. The other one is not. So that variable is not constant.
Yeah, that's extraneous variables. Be damned.
I mean, you can't prove that it wasn't. Now you have to do that one.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you have to get another red wagon.
That's right. Is what thickness of the glass when you're a carboy? Thinner than the other, that could help too. So we don't actually really know, Marshall.
I'm telling you, this is why we do it on the homebrew scale.
That's right. Can you imagine doing this kind of nonsense, Sully? Let's just ferment a big ass batch at 1065. And
I mean, honestly, that's the joy of doing it at a brew pub. It's a smaller system. I mean, I wouldn't do it at a 500 barrel batch of beer, but I could do it with 10 to 12 barrels because the rule of thumb on that scale is that if it goes wrong, you dry hop it and change the name.
throw some bugs at it.
That's the ancient brewing secret.
It really is too, man. But back in the day, you could tell when that was the case. When like, here's an amber Saison, No, this had some kind of contamination. Now it's just something else, and no, we're pushing boundaries.
It's like years ago, I was at the Barley Wine Festival at the Toronado, and somebody had brought and this is when people weren't doing Belgian beers, brewers weren't doing it, and somebody had a Belgian barley wine. I was like, huh?
Yeah. I have to believe that Belgian IPA stemmed from an accident as well. Because
sure.
Who in their right mind drinks that crap? Oh my God.
Don't get me started on that style.
I'd rather have a New England IPA than that. I'll put it that way.
Man, I'd rather have water.
I judged the first real quick. I judged the first year that was a category at GABF, and it basically came down to this: American hops, Belgian yeast, every single beer, and it was just like, ugh.
It's gross. That's kind of what's happened to English IPA. I feel like, if you ferment it with the Fuller strain, you can call it English IPA. Well, it tastes just like a Union Jack.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, everybody. It's the session. Hang on. We'll be right back. All right, I'm going to get something to drink real fast. Remember, we're still live on Facebook.
Are we live on Facebook?
Yes. So don't take my pants off yet.
Okay,
no, you can do that. I'm just telling you.
It's just live.
I'm going to turn my video off and take my pants off.
Okay, you do it. Play with your worms. At the same time.
I'll do my video as well. I'm going to go grab a drink.
I realized it was probably really fun to just leave for that long.
Story of my life. It's what most people do.
It's a lot of fun.
Just up and leave. That's why I'm a psychologist.
That's right.
Yeah.
Always heard that psychologists are some of the most fucked up people.
Brother, I'm telling you right now, there's not a single colleague that I have. If you're listening out there and I know you, I like you as a friend. I would never recommend a fucking psychologist or a patient for you. I'd be so terrified of what these weirdos fucking do to my friends.
It would change them.
Yeah, fundamentally better. It's better than God, man.
Sure. We like Judge Reinhold in the Jingle All the Way. No, Santa Claus, because he was trying to. Never mind. All right, we're gonna come back.
Okay.
Hey, thanks for hanging around, everybody. It's the session. We are here with Marshall from Brulosophy. Brulosophy.com. It's BRU. Because for some reason, like myself, we can't help but just come up with weird names for our podcasts.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of,
that was a plug.
You know, if you go BRW, you're gonna. I got smart and I bought that domain. Didn't cost much.
Yeah. Mine's ears up with a Z, but I also got it with an S, and then I got it hyphenated and unhyphenated. Like you can't you plug it in at some combination of ears up and podcast, and you'll find me.
If you get it wrong, you don't need to be listening. That's or watch or reading. That's basically it. Yeah.
Or if you guess it right the first time, then there's another issue going on.
Yeah.
I don't know. Speaking of issues, let's talk a little bit. You were mentioning before, a couple times about dry hopping, and you also have an experiment, long versus short dry hop length. And that's something that's also, this is why I like talking to you, man, because number one, it sort of recharges me to homebrew, but also these are things that we've talked about, and they are sort of debated, I guess, in, outside of homebrew clubs, probably not that often, but what does it matter? What does it matter doing long or short? Does it really make a difference? I don't know. Fundamentally, you do whatever you want, do whatever makes you feel good, to enjoy the hobby. But if you're after, I think, repeatable results, you should at least know where your flavors are coming from. So let's talk a little bit about this guy.
Yeah, I think also when it comes to dry hopping, if you're after the most pungent hop character, it's worth thinking about. I think from a layman's perspective, it makes sense that the longer those dry hops are in the beer, the more you're going to extract from them. So that's a good thing. And up until 5 or 6 years ago, that was kind of I don't think I dry hopped a beer until the early 2006, maybe 2007. Because to me, IPA was just a bitter bomb. I remember the first IPA I ever made was like 136 IBU.
Jesus.
Yeah, we all had to try it,
No.
You never tried that, Jason? Come on.
Of course not.
That was good.
Kidding me?
Yeah. That put hair on your chest.
Yeah. That explains a lot about you.
There's very little there, actually. Surprisingly, yeah. Insider trading. But yeah, the whole short, long dry hop thing, I was just curious about that one myself. I'd heard some talk, back in early 2015 about people who were getting away with 2-day dry hops or 36-hour dry hops. In fact, I think Matt from Firestone Walker had mentioned it somewhere along the way. And so I was curious to test it out. And so we did an experiment where one batch was dry hopped for 11 days and the other one got the dry hop for just 2 days. And in order to keep those as similar as possible, they set next to each other the entire time at the same temp. And so at day 9, I added the dry hops to the 2-day batch, basically. And then they were cold crashed and packaged together. And so in that one, what we ended up finding was out of 19 participants, 10 would have had to accurately identify the unique sample in order for us to say that it was statistically significant, and 12 actually did, which just allows us to say that tasters were able to reliably distinguish these beers, which, given the controls that we put in place and how anal we are about brewing these things as similarly as possible, allows us to stay with an element of confidence that the dry hop length is what it made these beers taste different. So,
What temperature were they dry hopped at?
So these ones were dry hopped at my standard ale fermentation temperature of about 66 Fahrenheit or 19 C.
Okay, because I've always heard, well, I say always, and I transpose a lot of things in my mind, but I thought that Brennelson saying like the 3 days or whatever was at lower temperatures, and Vinny's like 2 weeks or whatever was like higher temperature. So I thought the temperature played into how long the dry hops go.
I know Scott Janish has talked a lot about that as well and wrote about it in his book. We there's an experiment for that though. We've experimented with dry hop temperature as well, 76 versus 36 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm scrolling down to look at those results. And that one was also significant. So it would make sense to me then that if length matters and temperature matters, that if you combine the two, that it is going to have kind of a cathected effect, this blended combined effect.
Yeah. I wonder if, I mean, so you do a lot of experiments with everything sort of being equal and you're changing one slight variable. I wonder if that would be a valid experiment to do the appropriate dry hopping, technique for lower temperature versus higher temperature and seeing if those made a difference. But
yeah,
timing and that's a lot of work. I'm already uninterested in it.
Yeah, I think there's some thinking that the lower dry hop temperature, like, sort of produces more of like a whole hop cone kind of aroma and flavor. So I think that's what people are after with that. We actually did a test on this ourselves on our big system, and we found the sweet spot for us was 3 days. I was before that, I was of the common thinking that, it's got to be on there for a week, and then we were like, okay, what are we getting here? We realized that we're getting kind of, danker, more onion, garlicky kind of aromas that were sort of taking away from the beer itself, and really just transforming it from the type of hops that we were using and those aroma qualities. So, and it's also with the other added benefit. I mean, this doesn't apply to homebrewers so much, but maybe it does. If you like to make a lot of beers, that you can turn your tank quicker. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read somewhere, I want to say it was Janish, but it could have been somewhere else, that the cooler dry hopping extracts and keeps myrcene around longer, which is that green, fresh, rubbed between your palms hop character that I love. I mean, I think that's one of the more fantastic things about fresh hop beers. Whereas the warmer one, the warmer temperature will extract more things like linalool and citronellol, which is a biotransformed terpene, I guess. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. And the fact that you've got, I mean, you already mentioned a couple of my favorite IPA brewers, Matt and Vinny. And whatever they're doing, it's worth copying if they're doing it so well. And so if they're doing I believe Sapwood Cellars, that's where Scott Janish and Mike Tonsmeyer are brewing over in DC. I believe they have a dual stage dry hopping thing that they do at separate temperatures specifically for those reasons as well.
I like that recipe though you have. It's good hop addition. Simcoe, Centennial, Amarillo.
Classic, huh?
Yeah, it looks great. I'm gonna steal
that. You know what's funny? That there's a story behind that recipe. I have a twin brother, and as terrifying as that sounds, we are far different. But he got interested in brewing about a decade ago, and so he lives out in New York, and I flew out there, and he bought all this stuff, to brew his own beer, and really enjoyed it, and for a little while, and but every time he'd brew up a batch, he'd send me bottles of it, and he sent me he designed this whole recipe all by himself, and so then I stole it and pretend to tell people it's mine, but credit to Marco, it's his.
You guys, you're your own like side-by-side experiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it weird when you kiss him?
It's very weird. Yeah. Unless he has chapstick on.
Oh. Man, I don't know. I sort of long for the days in homebrewing where we didn't know what terpenes were and citronellin and whatever the hell you like rattle off a bunch of shit I've never heard. I'm like, I don't know.
You've heard of it. Be quiet.
You've heard that stuff. We know this.
Wow. Jeez, you guys. Yes, and you got to yes and me or I'm booting you. So doing these things, does it change your home brewing at all? Or is it because a lot of what you're doing, I think, is more just information gathering. How much of this do you actually take to heart and go, well, I'm going to do this now because of this experiment that I did?
I have to imagine both of you can relate with me on this one, where you've built up a name for yourself in the beer and brewing world, and so people look to you as an authority. Yes, especially you, Jason.
Thank you. This is all I've ever wanted out of a show.
Yeah. But you get questions all the time, like, how are you going to do this? What would you do? And so that's probably one of the more common questions. And I the way I interpret it is that people want to hear me say I do the easiest thing possible every time. The reality is, I mean, we're coming up on 400 and some odd experiments so far. And, if I changed every time a result came back, I don't know if you'd be able to keep brewing. I think more than anything, well, one thing that I like to point out is that when we have a significant experiment, what we do is we collect data from the people who got the triangle test correct, and we ask them. We don't tell them what the variable is or anything like that, but we have them compare just the two beers that are different, and then pick the one that they like the most. I hate the question. I'm not a big fan of preference being this objective thing, because it's not. But people wanted us to do that. Well, like clockwork, almost every significant experiment, it's cut right down the middle. You got half the people who like one of the beers, half the people who like the other one, and it doesn't matter what the variable is. I mean, if you pooped in a batch, I'm sure people would prefer the clean one. But beyond that, like most variables, it's yeah, maybe not you, but most variables, it's hard to say that it produces a more desired outcome, because what you desire is different than it's the same reason I'm not a big fan of hazy IPA and other people love it, you know? So with that, the things that have affected me the most, we started a series called Short and Shoddy, which is where I put a lot of the more wild stuff to the test. I'll mash for 25 minutes. I boil for 20 minutes. You know, that right there, you should have terrible conversion. You should have a sweet malty beer that has got DMS in it and diacetyl, and I'll ferment way too warm. And these beers, you know, 95% of the time come back completely fine and drinkable. Some have even scored in the 40s in competition. I mean, you just don't expect it, but brewing is a rather forgiving thing. It's a rather forgiving operation.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like being a beer judge in that regard, because you can sit and you can judge a beer according to the style guidelines that maybe it doesn't meet the style, but it still tastes good.
Sure.
So if you want to rebrew that beer, are you going to go for style, or are you going to go for what tastes good? So yeah, that question is sort of, it's almost like a data point that doesn't matter.
Right. The preference thing, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's my big hang up with competition and judging. I'm a certified judge. I get that world, but if I enter competition, which I don't do anymore, but if I do that, it's not to get objective, valuable feedback on who I am as a brewer. You know, what I read is, oh, these two people who judged it seem to either like it or not like it. I mean, that's the best you can do. And yes, we've got a standard, there's guidelines that we judge by, but I've judged with more than enough people to know that those guidelines are a little bit wishy-washy at times, you know?
Oh, for sure. Every episode of Dr. Homebrew we do, it's just the style guy, like Brian and Brian just go, well, I don't know. I disagree with this in the style guidelines, especially the 2015. It seems to have a lot of like tension in the community, because they've opened it up to a lot of different styles that are sort of
big time.
Yeah, it's just weird and wonky. But no, I would always, anytime I entered a competition, it would literally be just to try to win. I don't care what other people think about my beer, because I know that it's not that great, but I don't want to sit in I still remember the first notes that I ever got back. It was like, don't add more of this grain. And the grain wasn't even in the fucking recipe. It was like black roasted barley. And it's like, back off on the black roasted barley. And I'm like, okay, first of all, it's not in there. Second of all, you can go pound that shit right up your urethra. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I got real angry about it.
I'm sure. I mean, you've got to get it too, Sully, where somebody comes in and they got their nose in the air and they think they're an amazing beer evaluator, and they call out, you know, diacetyl yeah, like exactly. JP's perfect example. Everything's wrong with every beer.
You see that at the GABF as well. I mean, I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about this, but I mean, you know, you have like different, you know, it's a subjective environment. There's discussion that happens. I mean, you can have a pervasive judge that can kind of sway a table one direction or another. So, you know, it's, you know, it's not black and white. We're not like just measuring it with a device and saying this is the winner because it's got these many points off this machine. So,
yeah.
And I feel like with that perspective, it makes competing almost more fun, because then there's an element of luck of the draw. There's an element of that, like, oh, you know, what judging pair am I going to get? You know, and it doesn't have to be this you know, your score somehow reflects on you as a brewer. Overall, it's that specific beer, and whether those judges like it affects you.
Man, I get real heated about it.
On the couch.
Yeah.
Shoving black malt in your urethra. Jeez, man. Golly.
Hard. It's really hard malt too. Jesus.
It really is. Yeah. Well, you glue 3 of them in a line and you put that, you know, and then you
oh my God.
You should try huskless wheat, the midnight wheat. Whoa, man, I'm telling you.
Sounds good, man. Let's
Buy
do
some
this.
flaked oats and wet them, then do it. It's much better.
Well, speaking of the pressure of that, your next most popular article was about fermentation under pressure. And I
Yeah.
thought Sully was it was cool that you're going to be here for this, Sully, because that's essentially the commercial beer world, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe so this is done by Greg. This is actually written by someone other than Marshall, so you can sort of understand a little bit more. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now
Here we
I'm
go.
I'm just bullshitting. I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
well,
Greg's one of the first guys who started contributing to Brulosophy. He no longer does anymore, but he did some really interesting work back in the day. This is another really early
What
one,
happened to
April
him?
of 2015.
What happened to him?
He had some medical
Too much
issues.
pressure?
Yeah,
Oh,
too
sorry.
much pressure.
Sorry, that's bad.
He had some medical issues and ended up stopped brewing altogether. So,
Okay.
oh damn.
but he was curious. He was curious to find out about the impact that pressurized fermentation has on ale. That was his first test. I'm actually curious to hear you talk about this, Sully, because he quoted a whole bunch of commercial breweries here: Alpine, Bell's, Stone Brewing, Ninkasi, Society, Three Floyds, and The Alchemist. All apparently brew under pressure or ferment under
Well,
pressure.
I'm sorry to disappoint you, but we do not do that.
And so I don't either on the homebrew level. My understanding, the idea is that if you do that, it's the excuse that you can use to get away with fermenting warmer, and with
heard that.
while suppressing ester formation, right?
Yes.
That's the big thing. So, well, we wanted to put it to the test on the homebrew scale, and so Greg brewed up a zombie dust clone. This is 2015, obviously. And one of them he fermented under pressure. I think he kept it. He used a spunning valve to keep it between 5 and 6 psi throughout fermentation, while the other one was kept at atmospheric pressure, so less than 1 bar. And then kegged them up. They both finished at the same exact FG, one at 10, or both at 10-12. And to my eyes, they looked identical to each other. I would contend that Greg thought the same thing. He served these to, let's see here. How many people did he serve these to? 13 people overall. Again, this is an early one. We keep it to a minimum of 20 in non-COVID times these days. But he served it to 13 people. 8 would have had to get it right. Only 6 did. That is, again, that's just a hair over a third. So yeah, the pressurized fermentation of an IPA at the very least didn't seem to have much of an impact. It's fascinating to me that this one is so popular. I didn't realize people were terribly concerned, at least homebrewers were terribly concerned about fermenting hoppy beers under pressure. But
Well, I mean, again, I everything I know goes back to more beer, but we had those pressurizable conical fermenter lids. And maybe something has to do with that, because the ability to ferment under pressure wasn't even really around until relatively recently. So maybe something to do with that option. I do know Chris White at one point, I think it was on one of our shows, was saying that if you do ferment under pressure, like 1 or 2 psi, that is generally more beneficial for the yeast. But I might be getting that totally wrong. That anecdote, maybe just coalesced in my brain right now. But
What about hydrostatic pressure?
I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, that
Just the weight of the mat,
the weight of the beer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, you can't really test that one too well on the homebrew scale. We've done a comparison of fermentation vessels, one that was more shallow and wide, had a larger diameter, and one that was. But even if that, I don't think it came back significant. But even if it did, I mean, that could be so many different things other than hydrostatic pressure. I think the best area to do that would be on a commercial scale with actual, measurable hydrostatic pressure differences.
Yeah, because one thing Greg says in his article there was that most commercial homebrew or most commercial brewers are fermenting under pressure, but it's that hydrostatic pressure. It sounds like, because it's just the weight of the liquid. Is compounding down below. So is that considered fermenting under pressure?
No, I mean, I don't believe so. I think when people use the term, pressurized fermentation, they're talking about applying gas or capping the tank so that there's a specific amount of gas in there, again, to suppress ester formation. And I just don't, I don't understand the science behind that concept at all. I don't understand why anybody on our scale, especially as a home brewer, would want to go through the trouble of doing it. That being said, you mentioned the gear out there that's available now so that you can ferment under pressure. I own multiple fermentation vessels that have the capacity to do that, but I don't use them for fermenting under pressure as much as I do pressurized transfers because of fear of cold side oxidation, stuff like that, you know. And to me, that makes it worth its weight in gold. I mean, I'm a big adherent these days because of experimentation in the perils of cold side oxidation. So but fermenting under pressure has never been anything that I've been terribly, you know, interested in doing myself.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it matters at all, because also that's a lot of equipment.
Well, it's more, it's
home brewers, you know.
For home brewers, it's a lot more equipment.
Home brewers are, I mean, it's all about the gear. I mean, this is like, if you're a gearhead, this is awesome.
Yeah,
I agree. Yeah, I'm not even a gearhead. I like having the gear that makes doing what it is I want to do easier. And right now that means having a ball or a disconnect on the fermentation vessel to connect gas to, and some sort of a port that you can get that gas out of without getting any oxygen contact. And what's weird, and another thing I don't understand is I've yet to really have issues with oxidation in beer. This has nothing to do with fermentation under pressure, but in beers that are not highly hopped. The only beers where I've had a very noticeable impact from cold side oxygen exposure have been hoppy beers. And that spans style of hoppy beer too. I mean, I've made pale ales that start to turn that grayish purple color if I don't package them correctly. I've made New England IPAs that do the same thing. That is, to me, there aren't very many things in beer, outside of a contamination that taste worse than that oxidized hoppy beer. Ugh.
Yeah, oxidation is awful.
Awful.
Luckily, actually not unluckily, my business partner Nico cannot detect oxidation. So we'll be tasting beers on a panel. He goes like, "This one's fine." It's like, "Are you kidding? Are you getting the cardboard? Are you chewing paper right now? What's going on?"
I love everything we do.
Love this.
That's most homebrewers. Yeah, no, it's perfect, man. You got to taste this.
You are brewing some amazing shit, brother.
To me, the cold side oxidation thing in hoppy beers, I get as the way I describe it to people is if you take a lemon head candy drop and you strip it of the lemon flavor, that weird sickly sweet kind of grandma's coffee or candy dish thing. Ugh, I just can't handle it.
To you.
That's absolutely, we've intentionally oxidized beer to see what we can get out of it. And every single time with a hoppy beer. And I think what it is a lot of those hop characteristics are sticking around. So it's reminiscent of that sweetness and that fruity thing that you get from those candies. But then that oxidation creates, when oxygen interacts with certain compounds in fermented beer, it produces aldehydes that are definitely sweet, perceptibly sweet, right? So you can get an almond-like characteristic from them. Well, almond is associated with candy flavors at times. You can get lemony and limey things, but it's not in a good way. It's not like the fresh lemon and lime that you get from hops. It really is the most awful beer flavor that I can think of outside of a contamination. I really don't like it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just sitting here reporting all the ads as spam on your website. I'll be.
Just all you do is get an ad blocker, man. Thanks for supporting us, by the way.
Clicking on them and reporting them. That's all constantly. So in the chat, there's some lively conversation in the Facebook chat, which someone was like, "Oh, so this is where the show chat is nowadays, huh?" Yeah, it's where we are. I don't know. Your experiments and your show. Well, I don't know about your show because I don't listen, but your experiments in general, especially.
What he's saying is he loves it. He's listening to it.
Yeah. No, I see. I watch him on Facebook. Listen to it every week.
Yeah. It definitely gets some polarizing feedback. There are people who hate what you're doing.
Yeah.
And there are people who love it.
Really?
Yeah. Well, not
What's
hate,
going on?
but I think you definitely get some pushback, and especially with topics like this that are, I guess hard to pin down without doing multiple tests in different ways or whatever. You're sort of experimenting a little bit, which is a good name for any sort of series that you're going to be doing. But yeah, people push back on it. How do you handle that? How do you not just stop?
He's a therapist. I mean, he's a PhD in psychology.
I don't think you make it this far in a public, when your face is without being able to deal with it. I mean, I just don't care. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. It makes me sound arrogant maybe, but it's beer, first off. Secondly, if you're so emotionally tied to an approach that you're gonna get all up in arms and make a scene on social media, that says more about your own insecurities than it does about what we're doing for fun. So fuck off. I don't care. I could go down so many holes on this, because you're right. I mean, we get a lot of pushback, but there's a specific approach to brewing out there these days that I've never done, so I can't speak to. I've never spoken to it. I've never said anything negative about it. But the perception that Brulosophy has developed of this specific approach to brewing, particularly lager styles, is that we question it. Now, I have asked, hey, why don't you send me some of these beers? I'd love to taste it. When I've asked for help coming up with a way for myself to brew this way, I've been told I don't have the proper gear. Well, I like the lager beers that I make, so I'm not going to go buy all this special gear, which isn't cheap, and so we developed this, perspective from this small subsect of brewers out there that listen and say, well, these guys don't know what the hell they're talking about. Obviously, if they read these books that are only come in German, they would know way more. That's totally fine with me. I don't. The fact of the matter is this: if you do it and you love it, more power to you. Now, when you try to sell that as, like gospel, like that is the only way to do it, well, okay, then you're opening yourself up to a little bit of critique. But if you're cool with everyone else doing what they're doing, and you're not going to go home and get butthurt and cry on your, dog's lap, because somebody does something different than you, fucking grow up. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. We're just doing this for fun. It's beer, man. I mean, yeah, we might learn something from it.
I completely agree. I mean, what is the point? You're on this planet for a half a second.
Exactly.
You're putting some information. You've done an experiment. You're putting it out there. You're showing the results. You're showing your process. And, I think it's awesome you're doing that. I mean, I appreciate that. It's a little silly.
I hate it. No, I mean, I've made comments too, and it is sort of,
You hate what?
No, I'm just kidding. Any sort of, it's not like any, malicious or anything, but it is sort of fun to sort of poke back.
Mm-hmm.
But also one thing I personally need to remember, but everybody needs to remember, is that you're not saying this is now how you do the thing.
Right. Everybody must do this.
Right. It's not, you're not saying,
I know. You're not this oracle on the hill.
Yeah.
You're not exactly right.
Not the right way to do it. This is just what we learned in one moment in time, doing it this particular way, that this thing that you like to do literally matters not.
If I had a nickel for every time I've felt compelled to remind our listeners and our readers that we are not prescribing anything, this is just information. But, it's funny. I often say we're not trying to cure cancer here. It's one of the reasons I justify using the p-value. Okay, it works for us. If you want to change it, you can choose to believe what you want. Look at the world we live in. Holy shit. I mean, people are doing that already. This is just beer, it's just interesting to me that people so badly feel the need to have others agree with them and to be on their side, that they're willing to go to such lengths to separate themselves from other people, to put this distance between them. I just think it's really interesting. That's the psychologist in me talking as well, I'm sure, the philosopher in me, but it wouldn't be Brulosophy if it wasn't for a little bit of philosophy, I suppose. But yeah,
you're participating in the scientific method, and actually because of that, you're actually allowing criticism, but the criticism has to be based on a scientific method as well, and you have to challenge it the way, I found something different here. So,
yeah,
come exactly to him and fucking tell me to my face in my robe. Fucking let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
You're the QAnon of the brewing world.
Oh, come on. I swear to God.
Jesus.
You know who the QAnon is? There's the other people I'm talking about. Trust me.
You're making people question reality.
I want to read this stuff. I'm
Think
not even
mirror.
familiar with. This is awesome.
I mean,
Dude, I'm telling you, Lagergate is happening. There's an underground layer where all we do is ferment lagers warm. And
think logic. Oh, so you have a commercial brewery?
no, I don't. I am excited to announce, though, we've got a local brewery opening up here that we're going to be doing a lot of. We're going to move our experimentation into the commercial realm here, coming real soon. So that's an exciting development in the world of Brulosophy. Yeah.
What's it called?
The brewery is called Crow and Wolf. It's made up of people from other breweries around the Central Valley area, and some of the bigger name breweries around here as well. So they're hitting it big. They're starting off with a huge space, really nice big brewing system. They've got a setup that's kind of set aside for Brulosophy stuff as well. It's pretty nuts. It's going to be cool.
They have a big brewing system and they're just doing really good stuff.
Well, I'll qualify that. How many professional brewers do you know who start off on a 1-barrel rig? I'm just saying it's not that. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, Crow and Wolf.
Crow and Wolf. That's
Crow and
right.
Wolf.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where is that?
That'll be in Clovis, California.
Clovis.
So,
all right. Well, that's cool.
Next time we're having a sleepover, Jason, you can we'll bounce over there.
Yeah, please do. That'd be great. What was I going to say? You just distracted me. Got me horny for a second. Now I can't.
Whoa!
I was talking a wholesome sleepover, like where we watch Rad at and then eat cheese puff.
I like that shit. I don't know. So they have a section for your setup.
Not for my setup. They've got
the Brulosophy.
For doing Brulosophy stuff. They're really interested in the sciencey side of it as well. The head brewer is a real good friend of mine, has been for a while. He's brewed at House of Pendragon here. He's brewed at Full Circle Brewing. I believe both who've been on the session in the past, in fact.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's the head brewer over there now with Spencer Andrews. That's Brad Gaines and Spencer Andrews who are going to be heading up the brewing stuff over there. And they've got multiple different things going on. But yeah, part of what we're going to be doing is kind of bringing the homebrew experimentation that we've been focusing on for the last almost 7 years now into the commercial brewing world. Because why not? I mean, there are commercial brewers we know who listen to the show and who read the stuff that we put out, but wonder, how does this apply on a larger scale? And so that's kind of what we're aiming to tackle.
You just email them back, say, find out for yourself.
Put peanut butter in it.
Yeah, I don't fucking
again.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break, and we're going to come back. We're going to talk about your last most popular article and close out the show, talking a little more about homebrew. Hang on, everybody. It's the session. We'll be right back. All right. Need anything real fast? This will be just a quick turnaround. I'm
going to do one more refill. Do I have about 45 seconds?
You got 44. So bust your ass, brother.
Challenge.
33, 40. I'm just going to count the whole time. How are you, Sully?
I'm doing well, man.
Yeah.
I was at the brewery today, worked at home for a bit, then went down there, did some stuff, tasted some beer, was in the lab for a while.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a little slow right now, this time of year.
Sure.
But
this time of year, as if it's just normal. Yeah, we're just a little, it's a year. It's the thing. I don't know.
But yeah, what are you doing for the new year?
Nothing. Same thing I did for every other day. Just sit at home and wonder how to get out of this.
When are you getting your shot?
I don't know. Taryn might get hers soon-ish, through her work, but I don't know when I'll get mine. Probably when.
Is she going to be like totally like, flagrant? Like, I'm going out with the girls.
I'm getting my hair done now, instantly.
I'm bringing home a great haircut and COVID, but I don't have it. But I won't have it.
Right. I want to destroy my family. No, specifically because like nobody really knows if you can still spread it or not with the vaccine. So, but she'll have it. So there's that. When are you getting your shot? I'm sure they've already contacted you because you're in that age range.
No, it's because I'm a brewery owner. That's why we have a certain group of us.
Oh yeah, the George Soros teen contacted you. He said, along with your paycheck, here's a number.
I got my check and I get a shot and a gift card for Pop-Tarts.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
Feels good.
I'm not supposed to talk about that last part.
No. Well, I'll cut this out of the Facebook.
Please do. Are we still on Facebook?
No.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you what's really going.
Me and my adrenochrome friends.
Exactly.
All right. Well, let's come back, I guess. I don't know, man.
All right, let's do it.
I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
I know, it's fine.
Okay, here we go. Hey, thanks for sticking around, everybody. We're winding things up here, or winding things down, I guess, with Marshall from Brulosophy.com, and of course, Sean O'Sullivan from a brewery somewhere. What's the name of your brewery again?
It's just called The Brewery. Actually, that's already a name. I can't take that, so I'll just call it the 21st Amendment.
Yeah. Well, but is it the brewery like spelled right, or is it the brewery like
Here we go.
Brulosophy is the brewery?
Yeah. Is there an umlaut in it? That's the question.
That
brings the medal to the game.
Yeah. Look at Marshall, by the way, stealing Brulosophy from the brewery.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
Tom Arthur's real.
Cease and desist ale under pressure.
Oh.
I don't know, man. Grain comparisons. This one I found interesting too because
I'm excited about this.
Everyone talks about throw in a little bit of this, a little bit of that, different sort of base malt to goose a little bit of flavor or do whatever. I don't know, maybe to seem more continental. But you did one pale malt versus Pilsner malt.
Yeah. This one was brewed by our contributor Jake Houlihan, who still does quite a bit of brewing for Brulosophy and co-hosts the show every once in a while. He was interested in comparing pale malt to Pilsner malt. I want to hear what you guys think about the differences in that, because I remember for me, when I was growing up in brewing, it was pale malt contributed more of a rich malt character, maybe a little bit more biscuity. Not overwhelmingly biscuity, but kind of a toastier biscuity thing. Whereas Pilsner malt was more like white bread, maybe a little bit of crust. But that one was obviously more appropriate for certain styles and the other was more appropriate for other styles. How have you, I imagine you're still using them, for specific reasons in your brewery.
Yeah, we use it. We use Pilsner malt. Actually, we switched from, to a domestic Pilsner malt in El Sully, as a matter of fact. It didn't detect a change at all. But I mean, like the common thinking is like you said, I mean, the color is a little bit lighter. The flavors are a little bit cleaner. It's probably not as robust, as pale malt. So, I've drank the Kool-Aid on that.
Well, maybe there's a reason for that though.
Yeah.
So what Jake, that was exactly what those were my impressions as well. I don't care what Jason thinks, but so Jake brewed up it looks like he was doing an anchor lager type of clone kind of that he made up himself or something inspired by that. And so he did either about 96% pale malt or 96% Pilsner malt. I believe the pale malt, came from RAR. It was RAR 2-row, and the Pilsner was classic, Vireman malt. He also added 8 ounces or about 4% of acidulated malt, and then 0.4% Black Prince. I'm sorry, it's 4% acid malt. Black Prince just for color. He admitted that. It was hopped with just Comet throughout the boil. Let's see. So some of the more interesting findings here, he took some mash pH measurements, which I thought was kind of interesting. They actually ended up being relatively similar. The pale malt was 5.27 and the Pilsner malt was 5.3, which you would expect given the fact that the pale malt is slightly darker. We know that there's the darker roasted a grain gets, the more acidic it gets. But still, that's close enough to say they're about the same, in my opinion. In the end, the worts were exactly the same OG. I didn't expect that. In my experience, prior to this experiment, the Pilsner malt was always more efficient for me out of the mash. I would constantly get higher OG, and to the point that in my my brewing calculator, I use Beersmith, that I have a different profile set up when I'm using primarily Pilsner malt versus pale malt. Because I get higher OG when I'm using Pilsner malt over pale malt.
I don't remember ever noticing a big difference in that, but maybe because my OG or my final gravities or my starting gravities or whatever, I'm getting back into it. Just varied anyways, because that's just the nature of homebrewing in general. For me anyway, is that shit just goes weird sometimes. I can't really hit this consistently. But then again,
So-
I'm also changing my grain all the time. So
Yeah. Shit's weird all the time.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
is what I heard.
basically, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, Jake got both at 10:52, so that goes to show that shit goes weird for me too, because I don't know where I got my assumption from that Pilsner malt was more converted better for me. But both of the beers were fermented out at 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, these were kind of hybrid lagers that he was making. The pale malt and the Pilsner malt beers both finished around the same 1013 OG. That was another thing that I thought was kind of interesting, but again, not terribly surprising based on you don't hear talk about attenuation and stuff when it comes to certain base malts. Usually it's just about flavor and aroma and stuff like that. So he kegged the beers. Go ahead.
I would have thought that the Pilsner malt would have left a little more residual sweetness than the pale malt.
Really?
I would have thought it would have been different. Yeah.
I would go the opposite direction if I had
too,
if I
actually.
had. Yeah.
All right. Well, you guys
that's
are
fine.
wrong. I don't
He's
know.
getting back into it.
In
slowly.
this
It's
triangle test, you guys are the wrong. I'm the right one.
That's right. You
Yeah.
are the unique one here.
Thank you.
If you look at the photo of these two beers next to each other, they are nowhere near as different in color as I would expect, given that it was 96% either pale or Pilsner malt.
Yeah, I mean, he says like, "Oh, the wort made from the pale malt was noticeably darker." I'm like, I wouldn't say noticeably, brother. You didn't get a fucking porter out of it. But it is. But then again, you go, well, the term was used correctly. You've noticed one.
Well, he noticed it at the very least. There are often times where where Jake and I will be talking. He's like, "Don't you see it?" And it's the lighting, man. I can't capture it in the photo. That I have to take his word for it, but I don't see much of a difference.
don't
here.
either.
I got my brightness turned all the way up. So yeah. They're both beautiful beers, though. I mean, crystal clear. So he served these beers to 22 tasters, out of which 12 would have had to identify the unique sample, the JP beer out, in order for us to say that it was statistically significant. But in this case, only 8 people did. That was I did not expect to see that because of the emphasis that so many people place on base malt. We've done multiple base malt comparisons, but this one was pretty surprising to me. Is it that raw pale 2-row just isn't very characterful, or is it that Weyermann Pilsner malt is more like a pale malt? Who knows?
What do you think about the hops having anything to do with the perception of the malt or the flavors that come through from the malt? Like, I wonder if you did the same experiment with different hops.
Totally could be the case. This is just what I meant to say was, no, this is 100% correct. Accept it as truth, please.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No.
Well, I will say that this kid fucking calls out the Brewing Network because we got something wrong. So fuck you.
Where?
Whoa.
Jake,
What's
at the end, he's like, "Oh, well, during one of the sessions, the sample of the tailgater Kolsch from Flattail Brewing, the brewcasters began talking about how it tasted like what was brewed during domestic pale malt as a cheaper alternative to continental Pilsner. Then on a subsequent show, someone from Flattail phoned in to inform the crew that Kolsch had actually been made with Weyermann Pilsner malt. Perception can be so fickle."
Read the rest.
As an aside, kudos to Flattail on the Kolsch. So, and
it's for SEO.
Yeah, but first of all, there's no link back to the Brewing Network.
You want me to add that? I can put that on there now. I didn't know you guys had a website. I'm just kidding.
Not into that show. Like, come on, you're talking SEO, baby. You gotta,
Listen, I will. You know what? I'm gonna change this so when people listen to this in the future, they're gonna go back and see that I changed it. But you gotta shoot me the link for that show. I'm not good at finding that stuff.
I don't know.
See, come on,
Go
man.
on our website. No, Jake has to do it when he's writing. It's called.
I will make Jake do it.
Journalistic integrity.
That's right. That's
Okay?
right.
So if you have 3 journalists, with one has integrity, and the other 2 don't, do they kiss? That's what I want. Yeah. Statistically, does journalistic integrity matter?
Yeah, the P value on that, it's capital P.
That is definitely.
Yeah, that's funny that you read through that whole thing. I didn't even know he did that. It's probably why this one's so popular. People Google the Brewing Network and we come up first.
Right. I would love that, to be honest with you. By the way, speaking of that, our Twitter account was hacked.
What? No shit.
I think it's still hacked right now. Yeah, it's
Don't you
someone
fix it?
just took it over and then was like tweeting. I don't even know what the fuck they were doing. Like someone told me about it because I don't follow the Brewing Network anywhere, and then I guess enough people reported it as being hacked that it was shut down, and I thought it was deleted. I'm like, that's actually really funny. And then
I
it
want to
came
get
back up
hacked.
again. I know, me too.
Jeez.
I don't really. And then it came back up again. And then I started tweeting him. I was like trying to challenge him to like drop some bars and let's do a battle rap. And then it got shut down again. So I don't know where we're at right now. I know Justin's working on it right now with Twitter support, but yeah, our Twitter is not ours right now. Which
worst that we've got is we've had multiple, I think they call them DDoS attacks on the website.
Yeah.
Oh boy, those are fun to deal with. Yikes.
That's probably
What
just
is
something on
that?
your, like doing your server and not necessarily you specifically, or is it just you?
So I thought it was the same thing, like, oh, the server that we, our host, whatever, is being attacked. And so I'll go to them and they're like, no, you've got basically what it is these compute. This is the way it was explained to me. I'm a dummy when it comes to this, is that you've got these computers that set up like laser beams to your specific website, and they hit it so many times that it uses up all your resources. And this has happened probably, I don't know, 8 or 9 times in the last 5 or 6 years. It's wild. And we're talking like 3 or 4 weeks of the site constantly going down, and then me getting emails from people saying it won't go up. And yeah, it sucks, man. And you can't pay enough in security to stop it from happening. You pay for the security to fix it when it happens is the way it works. So
Yeah.
Jesus.
it's a pain in the ass.
Yeah. I wish it was like some rival, rival home brewer out there who thinks you guys are so full of shit. He wants to DDoS your website. I wish that was the case, but it's probably someone from the Ukraine just having nothing better to do.
That is my guess. Yeah, that's my guess as well. I
It's
can't
the under
imagine
pressure haters.
Yeah, I can't imagine there are brewers out there with enough animosity towards us to invest the energy in doing such a thing. But
Yeah, for sure. Also, I don't know how to do it.
yeah, me either.
Yeah. So you're saying you can use 2-row malt for your pilsners. That's what I'm getting out of this whole thing.
No, we're saying you have to now. That it's because we proved it. No,
Exactly.
Wireman stocks are tanking right now.
Hey, Ben, cancel the contracts.
That's right. Yeah, just get the cheapest Great Western you can find. The reality is that this is the perfect example of I still keep Pilsner malt on hand. I've got Saxa Pilsner malt, Saxa Pale malt, Saxa Maris Otter, Vienna, Munich. I do all of that. We did a Munich and a Vienna comparison that came back that people, I think it was barely significant, which is not scientific way of putting that, but surprisingly, it was way more similar than you'd think, despite the colors being vastly different. You're still going to use those malts. We're brewers. That's what we do. So
Overcomplicate.
Exactly.
yeah, we overcomplicate things and think that we're better than we are. That's
that is true. I mean, there is a romance to brewing, especially on the homebrew side. And maybe, I don't know, I don't think you lose that. At least, Sully, I don't think you've lost the romance and the allure of homebrewing, because you still homebrew. But even on
I love it. I mean, I do it on a little bigger scale right now at the pub, but which is, I think, is a lot like homebrewing. I mean, I have sort of the similar equipment that people do at home, just maybe pumps, and probably homebrewers have pumps and the ability to control fermentation temperatures. So yeah, I think it's a lot like homebrewing.
Yeah, I don't get to brew nearly as much as I used to in the beginning of this because I'm managing all of the other stuff going on. But I still get out to my garage a couple times a month and throw a batch together. And every single time, this sounds a bit sentimental, but every single time, as soon as I mash in and those smells start coming off the mash tun, and you make that first hop addition and you crack open that yeast pouch, every time it just takes me back to the beginning and why I do all this. And it sounds kind of cheesy, but it's true. And it's what keeps me brewing. And it's what I love so much about, I mean, there's really not much keeping me doing this other than my love of the brewing and brewing industry and, the folks that I get to meet but making beer. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. Your next experiment should be on, if you have to clean corny kegs before you use.
Oh my God.
You really have to do that, because that's what really kills me from homebrewing, and no cap. Like I hate cleaning kegs. I hate the kegs. I fucking hate them. I don't like them.
Why is it so hard?
It's not hard. I just don't like doing it.
I'm with you, dude. Cleaning kegs is my least favorite thing. It's my least favorite thing in all of the brewing process. I'd rather clean up 1 million brew days than clean a single keg. It's not that hard, but I hate doing it.
It's actually my favorite thing, guys. So I'm 1 out of 3.
You are 1 out of 3.
Statistically, I lose.
Well, hey man, if you need some extra cash on the side, I got 20 kegs to sell.
I'll be right there.
Well, Marshall, look, man, thanks for helping us talk a little bit about homebrewing on the Brewing Network.
It's my pleasure. Yeah, thanks for having me on. One little, we've got some new things coming up soon. In fact, just this week. What was that?
What do you got? I interrupted.
What do you got?
Tell you what you got. So you
we got the Brulosophy podcast in addition to brulosophy.com. But we just announced, or we're just announcing on this show as it happens. We just released this week the introduction episode to a new podcast that we're starting called the Brew Lab, where contributor Cade Job goes into the lab with actual brewing scientists to talk about more objective scientific research that they've performed. I think it's going to be really neat. Cade's currently at Oregon State University in their brewing program doing the post-baccalaureate stuff. And first episode's going to drop in the next 4 to 6 weeks, but you can go subscribe now. And again, I think it's going to be cool. Our first guest is going to be Dr. Tom Shellhammer, who hasn't heard of him. Just an excellent resource. And again, it's going to be focused a bit more on the objective side of brewing science as opposed to podcast? So it's going to be called the Brew Lab, but that's BR, you guessed it, umlaut U. It should be searchable in most places. We're still waiting on approval from Google, but Spotify, Apple Podcast, Stitcher, it's all there now. So should be a lot of fun. So
nice. Well, that sounds cool, man. I'm happy. It's good to see you guys growing. You know, a lot like a parent, like a grandparent.
I know. Growing more gray hair too. God, last time I was on the show.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
At least I got hair, right?
True.
Yeah. That's it, bud.
Yeah.
All right. I'm subscribing, and everybody else should too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, this one you're not going to have to hear my stupid voice any longer.
Oh,
this
really?
one.
All right, I'm not subscribing.
Yeah. This is Cade Job. Again, he's a student at Oregon State, and he's going to be he's already got 15 people lined up to, and they're going to focus specifically on research papers. It's going to just tickle that nerd in all of us, I think. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it sounds great, man.
Awesome.
All right. Well, we're gonna get out of here. Sully, thanks a lot, man, for rounding up 2020 with me, for me.
What's going on? You okay? Are you having a stroke?
I might be. I don't know. No, I'm just thinking too far ahead, and what I'm trying to say. That's all.
It's okay.
Real professional podcaster shit.
We love you. You're doing fine.
Thanks, man. Thank you everybody for listening to the show. Thank you everybody for listening to the Brewing Network, which is the premier homebrewing podcast. Everybody knows that.
Yeah,
every other homebrewing podcasts are not as good, and I want you to know all that right now. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, thanks to Marshall and the entire Brulosophy crew. I appreciate it very much. I don't know, man. 2020 is been great, and I hope that 2021 continues. I hope everyone gets the vaccine, and we can all go to HomebrewCon or some shit, man. I don't know. I want to do something.
Gather and kiss.
That's all we got. That should, we should do a beer festival and have it called Gather and Kiss. And I don't know. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks a lot.
We'll work on it.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Happy New Year, and we'll see you later.
Happy New Year.
Cheers. Happy New Year.
Perfect. Look at that. All right. Well, there you go. That was it. That's all I had.
We off?
We're still live. I guess I'll stop us live. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody, on Facebook. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great.
You guys are fun, and it's a lot of fun to Facebook. Bye, Facebook.
It was exciting to be on Dr. Homebrew.